Joining us now, and he will every Wednesday, like last year, our dear friend TSN hockey insider from the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, Mr. Darren Dreger. How you doing, fella?
I'm doing pretty well, guys. Thank you.
Regular season hockey last night. Finally, we actually have real hockey to talk about. I just want to know if you survived looking at chrome helmets and moving rink boards and mustard jerseys. Did you survive all of it?
I did. Some of it I was okay with, some of it not so much. The moving rink boards was a bit weird. I've got I don't know, I guess we all have 4K TVs or whatever the technology is now. But it was it was surprising to me the detail and some of the distraction that was coming from the glare off the ice and whatnot. As for the uniforms, the helmets, all of that, they're not. Look, here's a news flash for the three of us. That's not for us, right? They're not wearing it, doing it for us.
Exactly.
In the early game, I'm sure you guys caught it between Tampa Bay and New York. Having Chris Rooney welcome everybody, the official dropped the puck. I happen to like Chris Rooney. He's a funny guy. I mean, that was so scripted and choreographed that it was off-putting. Is this
they should
real?
have asked them to be. They should have asked them to be themselves and do that. Still say a few words, but just be yourself, rather than the script. Yeah.
Hey, if given the choice, the NHL will do stuffy, scripted, predictable over letting guys freelance at center ice. I understand that point of view as well. And I must say, the analyst in that first game, he's pretty darn good. I listened to him last night again and said, it's apropos that he's doing the first game out of the chute here.
Sorry. I thought you were talking about Emily Kaplan.
She's great too. She's great ringside as the reporter. Let's move on, Dregs. Vancouver Canucks get going tonight. Barring any last-minute extension with Bo Horvat, he's going to go in to the final year of his contract here. We know that Boudreau is doing the same. It occurred to me, I neglected to ask this in our Thanksgiving show, but for months and months, they talked about creating cap space, being flexible, fixing the defense, and then none of that happened. Just wondering how surprised you were with the Canucks offseason, and what sort of course do you think they're charting managerially here this year, if it's even, remotely predictable?
It really isn't. I guess I was surprised that nothing was done only because of everything that was going on at the draft, and I can tell you guys firsthand, we all experience it personally, professionally. If it's safe to say that the world is back to normal, and I don't think it quite is yet, that was close to our hockey normal. And what that means for me is being in Montreal, being in the lobbies of the hotels, being at the arena, and having face-to-face conversations with everybody involved in the process, including, of course, the player agents, right? So I had a strong indication from the JT Miller camp that a trade was more likely than not. And as we know, of course, that didn't happen. The Vancouver Canucks didn't get what they needed to make that deal and felt more confident in extending his time. And I think the fan base, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, was okay with that, but then it created a situation. And that now brings us to the Bo Horvat negotiations that are ongoing. And, I'd like to tell you that there's been movement. I'd like to tell you that there's been progress, but there hasn't been. And unless something has happened all of a sudden between Patrick Allvin and the Horvat camp, I think it's just as we talked about the last time we visited on the program, in that the Vancouver Canucks are willing to be patient. And I feel like the reason that they're in this position is because of, for good stretches last year, the team played pretty well. It wasn't necessarily just about selling hope. There was something there that they felt like they could work with. So I think that changed their mindset going into the offseason a little bit. Didn't change their approach with their head coach, Bruce Boudreau. Didn't change their negotiation tactics with Bo Horvat. But I think that they kind of went, okay, look, we've got players who want to stay here. We've got a pretty good group. Maybe let's feel this out a little bit longer.
One thing we didn't get a chance to talk with you on Thanksgiving episode is the Riley Stillman trade that happened right after he had taped everything.
Yeah.
So the emergency purpose to bolster the D, but they do actually get rid of the Dickinson contract too. So there is something else that's accomplished. It's a contract that at the end of the year, if they don't feel it went well, they can buy out with almost zero repercussion as well. So tidy work there. What do you think they get in Stillman? And how difficult do you think it is to ship out a contract like that? And maybe we saw how difficult it was because they had to lose a second round pick.
No, and that was the sweetener, right, Blake? So it's not easy. There are teams out that they're willing to take on those bad contracts, but those are the teams that are interested in collecting prospects or collecting draft picks and et cetera. In Stillman, I think you get an honest hockey player. You get a player who is trying to make his way here, right, and hanging on. So you're going to get a real honest effort, game in and game out. We talked on Thanksgiving Day episode about some concerns collectively, I think, that we have with the Vancouver Canucks defense. And I feel pretty strongly that that's an area that Alvin and Rutherford are going to continue to look at. And, I'm not piling this defeat of Bruce Boudreau here, but I feel like the only way there isn't something meaningful done by changing bodies, bringing in some help there, is if that structure that we also talked about finally settles in. And the defense that who's kidding who doesn't look to be very deep or strong overall collectively. If they don't get the help that they need in terms of the systems and how the group plays in front of them, then management may not have a choice but to address that and then bring in different personnel.
I was going to ask, how long do you suspect the leash is on Boudreau here, Dregs?
Long enough, and I say that in a cautious manner, to be fair, Matt, because, look, I'm respectful of that position. We all are. I hated having to put people on a hot seat. That's what we do. And in Bruce's case, he should be on a hot seat. He's in the final year of his contract. I know there's no friction, and we talked about this as well. I don't mean to keep repeating myself here, between management and Boudreau, but it is a result-driven business here, right? He's making more money this season than he was last year, so he gets a bit of a kiss there. But I think if you get to Christmas, you get to the midpoint of the season, and the team is either not doing as well as they were expecting or worse, floundering, then I think that you've got a real issue there. The one thing that I would wonder about, though, is, and we know the Vancouver Canucks were trying to get Andrew Burnett. Did they kick tires on Rick Tocchet? There's Mike Yeo there, and again, trying to be respectful here, but does it feel to you guys, I'll ask you, that they've got that internal option? Somebody who, okay, if they punt Bruce, they don't have to go out into the market and invest. And maybe that also is a factor into the decision-making.
Yeah, not middle of the season. Middle of the season, they've got an option they can get to the finish line. Yeah, for sure.
I think Yeo served two constituencies.
Yeah.
Bruce loves him and wanted him, and Alvin has said that he was important to Bruce, but also he could very well be your interim and your caretaker if you're making a head coaching change.
Yeah, agreed.
Darren, we have talked about this for so long here now, 2-3 years. I think this has been an ongoing discussion with you on Sekeres and Price, but owners being willing to let coaches go into the final year of their contracts because they're getting a little annoyed at paying all these coaches not to coach. Is Bruce in deep company this year? Who else is coaching into the final year of their deal as we begin the hockey year?
You know what? Honestly, I don't have that list in front of me. Maybe you guys do.
Last year it was prolific. It doesn't feel like his
managers too. Last year it was prolific.
Like I'm wondering about Dallas Aikens in Anaheim. It feels like he's in the final year of his set. There'll be a handful for sure of coaches who are in that situation. Maybe different levels of experience, but to start the season, it doesn't seem like there's as many hot seat again, quote unquote, coaches than there maybe was going into the start of last year. And that's a good thing for the coaches, but that does speak to the appetite for management and ownership in knowing and feeling like, okay, well, let's just make do with what we've got, because inevitably there's going to be changes and there are going to be guys on the sidelines. But off the top of my head, I feel like Dallas is in the final year of his deal. But beyond that, I don't know that there are that many.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about just the aesthetics of last night's opener, but there's a Canuck angle there, and that's an all-Pacific Division affair on the nightcap.
Yeah.
And, I think LA looked like we expected LA to look. And it's only one game, but at least now we know what Vegas is capable of. And that was more high end than I think people were giving Vegas credit for going into the season. If Vegas can be what they are on paper, Dregs, that's a playoff spot, right? That's a playoff
Agreed.
team if they perform to their paper.
Yeah, and then some, right? For the last couple of seasons, we've talked about the Vegas Golden Knights being a top Stanley Cup contender, and I think we've stopped talking that way. But if they can continue to play the way they did last night, I'm a believer in the Los Angeles Kings. I think if their goaltending can hold up, and we talked about this at Thanksgiving, maybe there's a walk-back opportunity for a team like the Vancouver Canucks or the Winnipeg Jets trying to make their way into the playoff picture. That was – I admittedly, I only watched about half of that game, and then I went to bed. So I watched the rest of it here in the East in highlight fashion this morning. But Vegas looked to tick a lot of the boxes. Again, what do you read in one game of the regular season? Well, number one, what I noticed was Chandler Stevenson. And, I'm trying to think if it was Max Pacioretty last year or a Vegas Golden Knight player who we had on the Darren Dreger podcast who just said, look, it's shocking to me why more people aren't talking about Chandler Stevenson. You look at the Vegas Golden Knights, you say, they're not that deep up the middle. They've got to figure it out. And there you look at Chandler Stevenson last night, and he's making plays and winning draws, and he's doing everything that you need a 1-2 center to do. Mark Stone obviously scores the big goal. So they had a lot of good things coming from all areas in what was, I thought the early game between Tampa Bay and New York was solid. Vasilevsky was terrific in the first period. The Rangers look like they're going to be a top contending team. But the half game that I watched between LA and Vegas, that was terrific hockey.
Yeah.
So if those two teams can sustain that, then it's going to be a fight right down to the wire.
Extension season in Buffalo, Dregs. We're all very happy for Don Granato, who knows people here, of course, with sports. Help us out on Matthias Samuelsson, please. 50 NHL games, no goals, 7-year deal.
What is he? What do you think he is? If this pans out, what is the top end of Matthias Samuelsson?
Well, that's what we don't know. I mean, if he's a defensive defenseman for the most part, right? So if he becomes a little bit more well-rounded in his development, then Kevin Adams and the Buffalo Sabres are going to look back at this deal and go, you know what? We won that deal. 7-year extension at $4+ million AAV. That's $30 million, that could have been way more than that with a salary cap going up. But you could look at it the other way. What if he is what he is and he doesn't get better? Well, again, $4+ million AAV isn't chump change, nothing to sneeze at. They saw enough of him and they see enough of him that they believe he's going to be a good defender for the 7-year term plus. So this was one of those rare kind of win-win scenarios. I think those who represent him from CAA hockey recognize that, look, there's nothing wrong with getting the security in this deal, especially when you measure it and you try and balance it, against the possibility that he's not going to develop into a higher end defenseman. And I know this, you guys just mentioned Donnie Granato getting the extension. He loves Matthias Samuelsson. When you've got a trusting young NHL defenseman as a coach, it just makes you breathe easier and sleep better at night. And certainly Donnie Granato does that. And, Buffalo has been kicked in the shins for so many years with Ralph Kruger and all the curious coaching decisions and everything that has gone on under the leadership of the Pagulas. And I don't blame them. I mean, they took their risks and gambled in a myriad of different ways. But in this case, Kevin Adams deserves credit. Well, the Pagulas deserve credit for having trust in Kevin Adams. Kevin Adams deserves credit for recognizing he needed to make the coaching change that he did and trusting Don Granato, who, by the way, had nothing but a sparkling track record of developing young players. So when you're in a full rebuild, which Buffalo has been in, you need a developmentally strong coach, and Donnie Granato is certainly that.
Marvelous stuff, Dregs, and I think the hot seat is a little cooler around the NHL. Third of the league has a new coach, and three teams, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Montreal, ran back interim guys from last year. So nearly half the league is on a coach who just got there or was there last year.
Speaking of hot seats, before we let them go, if we might digress, there are no longer hot seats at Hockey Canada because they are all empty. So that page has finally been turned after weeks and weeks of waiting.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea on timelines? Like, now what are we waiting for here, Dregs? You know?
Well, look, the only timeline we know is the changing of the board, which becomes official mid-December. Nobody is certain, and I'm including still staff members inside Hockey Canada, that an interim CEO will be hired. Maybe it's a smaller committee that manages day to day until the new board comes in. There's a strong appetite, as I talked about in Insider Trading and Sports Center, about looking outside, right? And maybe taking a more unconventional approach to the replacement. But guys, let's not kid ourselves here, right? The culture change does not happen in a boardroom in Calgary. It can help, it can manage, it can prioritize, it can enforce, but that culture change has to go top to bottom, from the head of Hockey Canada right down to grassroots small town Canada. And if it isn't enforced at those levels, then we're going to be continuing to face these issues for decades to come. So let's hope for the best, for all that are still there and for the betterment of Hockey Canada moving forward. For me, the next big step is the conclusion of the investigations by London police and the National Hockey League. Yeah. What went down in 2018, and is there criminal charge that can be applied to this? We need those answers.
We do, and we'll get them, and Bob Nicholson will be before that parliamentary committee next week, so we'll see what Mr. Nicholson has to say going back as basically the guy who brought Hockey Canada into the modern century. I mean, Correct. It was a little boardroom in Ottawa run by Murray Costello for years till Bob Nicholson said, let's brand this organization, bring it to Calgary, and make it the modern institution that we have come to know. Great catching up again, my friend. Wednesdays going forward. Appreciate this, sir.
All right, guys. Next week will be fun.